Friends, thanks for being with us. And as I said before, oh dear, I got the wrong document. Sorry, I have to try again here. This was a couple of years ago, our actual answers. So let me go back and do that again. But as I said last time, we answered the first 4 queries of the 8 queries, and there you go. Can everyone see those queries up on the screen? Okay, so these are the queries 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the queries. And what happens, the mechanism, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, because most of you go back a long ways with SCYM, but just for those of you who are newer, typically the Ministry and Care Committee of SCYM sends queries out every year, typically in the fall or late fall, to all the monthly meetings in the year and worship groups in the yearly meeting, and we answer those queries and get them back in a timely fashion so that they can be presented as individual state of the meeting reports, and then also aggregated up into a state of the yearly meeting report. This year, our yearly meeting is in a month, over a couple of weeks, so we're wanting to get those in. And this will be very timely if we can finish this today. So just to review, last time we went over these 4 queries, queries on worship, on the meeting community, on religious education, and how we have witnessed to testimonies. And this time, we're going to be focusing on 4 queries. The first one is decision making. Then there's one on intervisitation and outreach, membership changes, and then any additional concerns we might have that we weren't able to address in the other 7 answers to the other 7 queries. So here we are, and I think what I'd like to do is, if I could ask for a volunteer to read query 5, and you see each query kind of unpacks into several sub-queries. If we could maybe just read all of those each of the sub-queries out at once, and then go into some worship and just speak out of the silence on those queries. So the first query is decision making. And do I have a volunteer to read what's under decision making there? Looks like Steve is raising his hand.
Decision making. How is the good order of friends used among us? How does the light illuminate our meetings for worship with attention to business? How does our meeting deal in love with the inevitable differences that arise from diverse leadings and points of view on issues of faith and practical matters?
I have a sub-query to the first sentence, which is everyone who is active in the Friends meeting, do they know what the good order of Friends is?
I do not.
I suspect everyone who has attended for a while, or I'm addressing Sarah's sub-query, knows at the very least that we don't vote when we take decisions. But beyond that, I'm not sure how much, and maybe that's what Chip was speaking to, how much we're clear about beyond that.
It does raise the issue about um, and tied in with religious education and the fact that we do and are giving the Quakerism 101 more often, which helps, but we may want to focus another forum on specifically issues of business meeting and good order in that situation, simply because not everybody is aware, and it would at least highlight that topic. I think, in fact, we've had better attendance in business meetings given the Zoom context rather than having people come to the meeting house, and that has in some ways expanded the range of input and the responses that we get in our meetings for business, with attention for business. So I think that's been beneficial in some ways.
I don't know. If anyone's interested, the Quakerism 101 session on business meeting and on how Quakers conduct business will be on April 25th at 1 o'clock.
Well, I would suggest that this might be the right query to raise the example of the ad hoc committee on the meeting's finances, which I think was tasked a year or over a year ago, 2 years ago. But one outcome of that was some specific recommendations or leadings that were passed on to other committees of Friends Meeting Austin, and that occurred, I think, within the last fiscal year. And so, in terms of good order, an issue came up, a group was brought together, decisions were made, some unity was arrived at, and then some actions were proposed to standing subcommittees. And that process, it unfolded over a couple of years, but and it was seemed like good order to me as a relative newcomer.
I think we've done very well in following Quaker good order in dealing with the COVID crisis. We were able to call a special purpose meeting for business with attention to worship in March of last year, and our first hybrid meeting where we had some people both in the meeting house and via Zoom. And we made the decision to move to virtual worship rather than in-person worship, and we've implemented that, I'd say, very successfully over the past year. And as Jim mentioned, we also had a suggestion arise from within the meeting community regarding special donations to help support people in the time of COVID crisis. And that was considered through the committee structure and brought to meeting for worship attention to business and approved and very successfully operated and implemented. So those are a couple examples, I think, of Friends Meeting of Austin operating in good Quaker order.
I think it's interesting to note that the period of this State of the Meeting report corresponds pretty much exactly with when we began meeting over Zoom for Meeting for Worship, meeting online. And so in a way, just entirely by accident, it's kind of a report of our life under video conferencing and our life with the pandemic and all the other things that have occurred. But it's interesting that this is a window of time where it has been this experiment in a very different kind of life in the meeting. And you know, and as we think about the state of the meeting, I would just encourage us to reflect on that.
I'd like to make two somewhat unrelated comments. Maybe they're not. But first is the clerking, both of Meeting for Worship with Attention to Business and of our committees. I'm always so impressed by how much both clerks of meeting, associate clerks, recording clerks, and clerks of committees are so very, very committed to doing things in the light and in a state of worship, and always kind of trying to move toward that. I've seen that, and I've heard comments from people about that, from individuals who have those charges, and it's just always a source of great inspiration to me. The other thing I wanted to mention was how, you know, it talks about, I'm looking at all the sub-queries here, how we deal in love with inevitable differences and things like that. But there are also other things, just a little inevitable pieces of sand that get in the gears of things, you know, like someone misunderstood misunderstood in the sense of misunderstood factually, you know, something or what was supposed to be done, or several people acted on something, took an initiative and that sort of thing. And to an exceptional extent, we don't let that get in our way. You know, we just say, oh, you know, this is, and very often we make it into something fruitful, you know, that we learn from. And I really appreciate that. I've certainly been in other groups where people spend inordinate amounts of time raging at each other, you know, because someone didn't understand this one rule or something, you know, and we don't do that. And I really, really think that that's part of the good order of friends, and also the part about how we deal with each other in love. Not about diverse leadings, but just, you know, the little logistical hiccups that happen.
that brought to mind one other aspect of decision making that I'm really pleased with and gratified by is the fact that the meeting decisions are being handled in ways that incorporate some of our adult young friends, people who maybe have not been as active in past years while I was here, and not even present as many people. So I'm really glad to see people from that younger generation stepping forward and taking responsibility and carrying us in directions that are very relevant, and that's gratifying to see.
Friends, just so you know, I am mindful of time. However, I think the decision-making query is probably the weightiest one amongst these 4 queries. So I'm not, I'm giving it a little bit more time than maybe for the other queries. Might I ask, as part of this query, are there ways that we could improve in our decision-making? I know it doesn't say that, but maybe just, I know I've heard some very positive things, but I want to leave the door open for any questions about improvement or anything like that.
I have heard recently comments that we don't make decisions fast, which of course is by definition a Quaker situation. But the only way I know to deal with that is to make decisions or plans in advance of emergencies. Otherwise, somebody's stuck with making a decision all by themselves or with 2 or 3 people because we haven't had a way to get together to make a decision.
I wanted to remind friends that the State of the Meeting report is a report about where we've been and not a collection of ways we can improve or, hopes for the future and so on. So if at least in preparation of the report, we can concentrate on giving to the yearly meeting a good and accurate picture of how we feel that this past period has been.
One other thing to add maybe is that within the past year, Peace and Social Concerns went from a regular monthly meeting to a weekly meeting. And that was in part to, the intention was to use that time to determine how and where COVID funds should be distributed. But we meet whether there are funds available or not, and always have an agenda of sorts. We haven't been keeping minutes, and that's been raised as a possible area where we might, change. It's hard to find someone who feels they have the capacity to record, but we've sort of dealt with that by feeling that our agendas are in part a record of our discussions, and many of what we've been at, the things that we've been seeking unity on in the past year do relate to actions that we can take. And so the actions sort of speak for the work of the committee. I have no idea if that's good order or not, but that's sort of what we've been up to.
I want to say that that friend speaks my mind. I'm on at least one committee where we haven't been taking minutes, and we need to do that.
that speaks to my mind too. One of the things I experienced in this meeting is that and I've been in this meeting for over 20 years, so, is that we really do remake decisions because we haven't taken careful minutes and we don't have a place to go back and look. And so committee minutes would be very useful. Our minutes for a business meeting are good, but doesn't always reflect what's going on in committees. Thank you.
Well, being the one who said I don't really completely understand what the good order of friends is, let me give a few examples of what I think it is that I've seen over the last year. One was like Steve said, the meeting for determining the future of meeting at the meeting house, and I observed there some, especially when it came to the other faith group that's there, and how we were going to determine what we were going to deal with that. And that decision, I realized after the meeting was over, thinking about it, was made in love. It was listening. It was listening with open heart. And then a decision was ultimately reached by the meeting. So that was one example of what I might consider good order of friends. Another example that I've seen in the last year, and I don't know if these are useful, but there was during one of the meetings, there was a change, I think, in Rise of Meeting, that we missed a portion of it, and somebody indicated that did we talk about this, and there was no response to that, and there was a little bit of conversation after that, and shortly later, I think it was Walter stepped in, and he used that as an example of what racism is, and how it was, and I don't remember who said the comment. There was nothing specific about it, but how failure to listen is an attribute. The silencing of someone's voice is that's just, and it was used in a calling in a loving manner. It wasn't chastising. It was something that, that's exactly right, and we all learn from. The other example, and it kind of maybe speaks to what I think that was Mary talking about, because of the slow decision-making process. And believe me, that's hard for me because I was a senior manager at an electric utility. So sometimes I had to make rapid decisions, but I think the formation of the committee to the ad hoc committee to prepare the meeting house and prepare the meeting, as it were, for a dual meeting structure with Zoom and physical presence in the meeting house. That didn't just come about. That's been discussed, I know, for probably a month, maybe even a little bit more, at least getting people to think. So those were examples of kind of maybe of some of the things you said that I've seen.
Well, friends, do we have any last thoughts on that major query, decision making? If not, are we ready to move to the query on intervisitation and outreach?
Just one further thought. I think it sort of just ties into, I think, what Mary was talking about. And I guess that point about the sort of difficulties of making decisions quickly in a crisis, whether just as this is sort of potentially a historical document that will be passed on, we should give the actual context for that, which was the the ice storm and the power outage in the midst of a pandemic. That was really the one point this year that I really felt that decision-making process as very, very difficult, just because there were these very pressing and very important decisions that needed to be made about the use of the meeting house. And it was just very, very difficult to reach people and to know who to reach. And just that was sort of a bit of just a wake-up call to say that we should try to think, as Mary was saying, try to think about these things in advance so that we have some sort of practice or procedure and way to move when we have these sort of disasters.
Thank you, friends, for that the thoughtful responses on that query. Could someone unmute themselves and read query number 6 on intervisitation and outreach?
I can do that.
Thank you.
Intervisitation outreach. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes, okay.
Yeah, yes, we can. Thank you.
How has intervisitation and involvement with friends outside our meeting affected our meeting's spiritual growth? How have we reached out to seekers and community around us? I'm going to read it again. How has intervisitation and involvement with friends outside our meeting affected our meeting's spiritual growth? How have we reached out to seekers and the community around us?
One of the unexpected for me benefits of going on Zoom has been having people join us for meeting for worship. Paul and Carol, the Farquhars from England, people who've been part of our meeting in the past, now finding a reasonably easy option to drop in for meeting for worship.
And could I just add to that, people who haven't been a part of our meeting in the past, who are in far-flung locations like North London, New Jersey, and I'm sure there's other places I'm not thinking of. That's also been really something to see.
Yeah, there's a certain, how shall I say, not an irony, but in many ways, the video conferencing has expanded our ability to outreach and to visit with far-flung meetings and all of that. On the other hand, the life of intervisitation really has to do with friends coming to know each other across distances, forming friendships and relationships. Zoom is a help, and it's what we needed at the time, but this is where some of the weaknesses of video conferencing as a means of fellowship really sort of shows. But we've certainly done the best with what we've had, and friends have been afforded the opportunity to attend meetings and conferences all over. And broader Quaker conferences like Friends General Conference have had expanded participation. So, I think all friends will need to deal with this this contradiction of we want in-person meetings to deepen our relationships with each other, but teleconferencing meetings afford us an irresistible opportunity to make experience among friends available to everybody.
I don't know if this is the right query because the Georgetown Worship Group is under our care, under the care of Friends Meeting of Austin, and might be not considered outside our meeting. But I have a concern, and this is maybe more an impression, and so I'd love to be corrected here, that we haven't had as strong a tie with the Georgetown Friends as we have in past years, partly due to some key members moving out of the area. But I'd love to hear anything more about that. But that's my impression, is that we haven't been as much in touch with them as before.
Just to add on that point, they have not been meeting since COVID, since the facility that they use is not available to them.
We've had a variety of guest speakers at forums from the larger community, and that feels to me a little bit like outreach, because not only are we educating ourselves and each other, but we're inviting those from seekers in the community into the life of the meeting.
Liz has a comment about Georgetown.
Yeah, I have a knowledge about Georgetown that probably nobody else would know about. They've been communicating with the yearly meeting. They're feeling themselves almost a monthly meeting, I believe. And I think COVID has interrupted their process for becoming a monthly meeting. But they're calling each other. They are still associating with each other, and a couple of them came to yearly meeting sessions. So we should be more in touch with them, but they are alive and well, even though they are not meeting at this point. So I'm sorry they're not coming to our Zoom meetings, but I think they feel themselves a real community. So so that's, I think, why they're keeping together instead. So.
In terms of also intervisitation. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Tobin,
Sorry.
is it okay? Were you trying to speak?
I just was going to throw in something, yeah. That in a different sort of way, we reached out to, during this particular time, and especially during the ice snowstorm, to support the East Austin community of Al-Islam and their membership, to see how we could be supportive of them and their spiritual community to some degree. And I think that's a part of reaching out. There was another thought too, which came to mind, but I'll hold off on it until I remember it. But that was one thought, of reaching out to be supportive to seekers of various places in our.
I would like to mention the so-called buddy system that was initiated, or at least proposed, by Karen Council. It's within our meeting. It's not beyond our meeting, but it is somehow connected to intervisitation and outreach within our meeting. So during COVID, Karen Council proposed that people who would like to have buddies and would like to be buddies should let them know, and that those buddies could be matched up. And I have found that to be useful in deepening my relationship with another person in the meeting. And I would almost recommend that it continue, although I realize it's not beyond our meeting, but nonetheless, I want to give a shout out to Caring Council for the buddy system.
I have a comment on that as somebody from Caring Council, that we didn't have very many takers on that. It's wonderful that it worked for those who participated, but just for the record, for some reason there weren't many people that, from my understanding, that were needy in that way. We had a lot of people who offered to help others, but there were not very many people that said they needed to be on the receiving end. Let's put it that way. So I just thought I'd mention that.
I did recall what I was thinking of earlier, and that is the outreach that's been done consistently, but also particularly around holiday season, to prisoners, people who are incarcerated. It has not always been easy to make the connection or sustain it, but we're reaching out and sending that care to those who are in prison.
Friends, are we ready to move on here to the next query? And note at the end, there's a query for concerns, which is anything that we weren't able to get to before. So if something occurs to you, we can do it then. Would someone like to read the next query, please? Just unmute yourself and start reading on membership changes.
How has our membership changed? How has this affected the life of our meeting? Among other changes, state information on births, adoptions, and deaths. Oh, I meant,
I would like to say that we've had, how many births? We've had 2 births of children directly into the meeting, and a grandchild, and also a child of Austin Tansurka. I think we really can honor the grandchild and the 2 that have been born into our meeting. And it's been a great joy to have those births during this year, because it's been a hard year with a lot of losing people. So, and then also we've had new members come on our online worship, which some of them young, and not new members, but new attenders. And that's been a joy for me. So that I hope they continue to be part of our meeting, and that some of the people who aren't being part on Zoom for various reasons will come back when we have the ability to be in the meeting house.
Yeah, please correct me if I'm mistaken, but I don't believe we had any actual clearness for membership during this period, which would not have been impossible. We could have had a clearness committee via video conference, but we didn't. And I'm unclear as to whether that was because of some discomfort with the process, or some difficulty in the way that we meet over video conference to encourage membership, or whether it just reflects our ambiguity about the membership process itself.
Probably a good time to recall that Karen Council spent some time, and I think we had 2 forums, and put together a document about membership, which was approved by Meeting for Worship with Attention to Business and put up on our website to make it clearer as to what that process is and what membership entails. But I think you're correct, Terry. There were no new members. No one applied for membership until very recently, this past week. I'd be happy to let everyone know that Chip has applied for membership and a clearness committee has been formed.
Hooray.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to it too.
By the way, it's probably not good Quaker process to say hooray, but I do it anyway.
Maybe there's another good Quaker word for that.
It's notable to me that while we have new attenders on Zoom, we have a fair number of people who we haven't seen in a year.
I'd like to mention that I think those people are very much with us in spirit and in their relationships with other friends outside of Meeting for Worship, at least some of them that I'm aware of. And that's a positive thing. I just think it's maybe a function of us doing it on Zoom.
Hope you're right.
At yearly meeting, at the end of the session, the names of the births and adoptions and the deaths are read aloud. So it's helpful to list the names of the births in the State of the Meeting report. Also, the deaths, I don't think we've had any deaths. But anyway, that's been in the State of the Meeting reports when I've been involved in it. Maybe they're not anymore. But
Glenn, are you suggesting we maybe list those out now?
no, I'm not. Okay. But I'm suggesting that they be listed before.
Sorry, Glenn.
Just that they're listed before it's submitted to South Central Yearly Meeting.
The list needs to go with the state of the meeting report, is what
right.
Glenn's saying.
Exactly.
And so, but I think we do know the names and we can check on them.
Okay.
It needs to go with the state of the meeting report.
I think that it's worth noting that having no deaths during a period of a pandemic is significant and does suggest, at least, that we're taking good care of each other in the way that we've managed to keep meeting and keep our community alive without spread of the virus.
Well, thank you, friends. May we move to our last query, which is other concerns. That is things that maybe we didn't occur to us or we didn't fit in the other queries. So would someone like to read that query aloud? Just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Does our meeting have concerns that have not been adequately explored in answering the queries above? How have these concerns affected our meeting's spiritual and community life? And I confess I've got little scribbles here on the paper that I would like to bring up at this time. One thing is back to, and I'm sorry, I'm slow on this, back to the intervisitation outreach. One friend mentioned the death row holiday cards, and there have been about 10 people, mostly non-Quaker, who have agreed to be pen pals to the approximately 40 men on death row who replied to our holiday card saying, yes, please, I would like a pen pal. So that is a continued outreach to the community around us. I had been thinking more like Deloney Street, and I wasn't thinking death row about community around us. I want to personally thank the meeting, in particular, Howard and Terry, for providing incredible support and technical wonders in providing a memorial service online for my friend, my non-Quaker friend, Deloria Grant, who died of COVID last July. And we had a memorial service on her birthday in December of 2020. And there were a lot of people there, including a few Quakers. And it was an outreach to the community in that people did know that it was put on by the Friends Meeting of Austin. There's one more. This one is not so much of a thank you as a concern. What about when Friends Meeting of Austin rules are broken? There was this past year a Facebook attack by a homophobic attender, mentioning by name 2 members of the Friends Meeting of Austin. I don't know if that was ever adequately resolved. That was on the Friends Meeting of Austin Facebook page. I don't know if there have been any consequences. And in general, I have a question about consequences because the neighbor who built the new house across the fence and basically killed the tree by cutting too much of it that was on our side of the fence, said, yes, he would replace the trees and did in fact replace the trees. But when he asked if he could use our parking area for a couple of cars and was given permission for a couple of cars, another friend went and took a picture of way more than a couple of cars. So, you know, our neighbor had permission for X and gave himself permission for X plus. And there was no follow-up on that that I'm aware of. So I'm just wondering, what about when rules that we've made for use of our property or for our community are violated?
I don't want to preempt response to what Joanna has raised, but I just wanted, but we're almost out of time, and I wanted to bring in just a short note. Well, I'm just going to say it. This is not a really significant thing, but I think it's worthy of note that since we've been able to record Zoom conferences, we have been able to compile a very thorough library of videos of our forums, of our Quakerism 101 and important meetings that are available on the website. And this is going to be of some lasting value. And if anybody wants to know what the life of Austin Friends is about, that's a good place to dip in and really get a sense of it.
On questions around the property, I'd also like to say, and maybe this relates to intervisitation and outreach, but there have been questions about how to use the property under pandemic. And so we've taken steps to provide the kitchen support for members of the meeting community who wanted to feed the unhoused. We talked about, but didn't make the meeting house available as a voting location. We talked also about whether there were other ways we could use the property. That's just another observation to follow on to Joanna's comment.
Friends, we're within 5 minutes of meeting for worship. So if there are 1 or 2 very brief additional contributions, that would be fine. But other than that, we need to start easing into the silence preceding meeting for worship. Thanks.